Oswego Office of International Education and Programs, Associate Director for Education Abroad. I'm here today as a representative of Oswego, but also as a representative of the Council on International Education for SUNY. One of the things that we have been working on as a council and in the steering committee is to put forth some workshops, webinars, talking about important issues taking place in education abroad. And today we are going to be talking about I2M study abroad. I have a quick introduction and then we'll move forward to our panel who will talk about their study abroad experiences. So as students consider to study abroad, many times they are excited about the possibilities of going to another country to learn and to explore. At times about the other, but many times they end up learning so much more about themselves. The I2M Study Abroad Panel Series campaign was started at Oswego with the goal in mind of encouraging students from underrepresented backgrounds to study abroad. The idea came from Harvard University African-American students who wanted to be recognized as Harvard students. Thus, they started a campaign called I2M Harvard. Apart from wanting to be recognized as students who attended Harvard University, they also wanted to be taken seriously and not to be undermined. We have borrowed at Oswego the campaign, the Harvard Students campaign, but we have twisted it a little bit and we've called it the I2M Study Abroad campaign, with the ultimate goal of allowing students to express themselves, but also to increase the number of students going to study abroad at SUNY Oswego from across the SUNY system. When we talk about underrepresented students, we are talking about African-American students, Native Americans, Latino, Latinx, Hispanics, Asian Americans, veterans, students with disabilities or issues with accessibility, I should say, non-traditional students, white males, and students from LGBTQ background, and of course, students in sports and students who usually financially wouldn't be able to afford to study abroad. So how do we bring all these students to understand the importance of studying abroad, and how do we make a process or put a plan of action in place to assist them. Today, as I said before, we have put a panel of 5 students who happen to be SUNY Oswego alumni, and 1 student who is an undergraduate student. They will talk to us about their study abroad experiences as underrepresented students, highlighting those experiences that they had while studying abroad, and some of them while working overseas, as it pertains to their identity, their culture, and as well primarily to where they come from and where they plan to go. So I have a set of questions I want to ask, and you guys could jump in and answer them. So I will start with, please introduce yourself with the following: your name, your pronouns, if you have one, your ethnic background, your major, and tell us when and where did you decide to study abroad or work abroad? So one of you get started, or I'll call names.
Okay, I'll get started. So hey guys, my name is Awa Dembele. I am currently a senior at SUNY Oswego. I'm a criminal justice and sociology major with a minor in forensic science. And I think the next one was, where did I study abroad? Okay, cool. So, and I studied abroad in the Czech Republic, Brno, Czech Republic, in the fall of 2019.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tiana Morris. My pronouns are her, she, and I am a Black American from New York. So I graduated from Oswego in 2016, which is very weird to even say it's been that long. But while I was a student at Oswego, I was a marketing major and a human development minor. And I studied abroad summer 2015. I did a semester in London through the CAPA program. And then a month after graduating in 2016, I participated in a business research forum in Shanghai, China, as well as a culture exchange program in Hangzhou in China.
All right, I can go and ask. This is always so weird because you're like, who's gonna hit the unmute button? Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy these conversations, and thank you, Lizette, for inviting me once again. My name is Naomi. I'm pronouns she, her, and Afro-Latina from the Dominican Republic. I've been living in New York City for maybe more than 12 years, I believe. And so I graduated in 2018, which I know Tiana said 2016, but to me, it also sounds weird to say 2018. I don't know, it feels a bit long, but I double majored in international studies and communication, and I minored in Italian. Throughout my 4 years, I did a lot of study abroad programs, quarter courses, one in Argentina, Italy, Benin. But the one that I think I'll focus on the most in this discussion is my semester in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, since it was the longest and I think definitely had the largest impact. And yeah, I think that's all right. Yeah, pleasure.
My name is DeAndre. Hello, guys. I graduated in December of 2020, which is last semester. I studied abroad in Shanghai, China in the spring of 2019 semester, and my pronouns are he and him. I decided to study abroad just because it was always like a dream to me growing up, like just going to another country, living there for a certain extended period of time. So that was just always something I wanted to do. So yeah.
Thank you. Francisco, want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Francisco Perez. My pronouns are he, him. I identify as Latino. I graduated from SUNY Oswego in 2014. So I think I'm maybe the oldest person. That's okay. That's fine. When I was at Oswego, I majored in political science and I studied abroad in Cuernavaca, Mexico for a semester in 2013. So when all y'all were children, but that's okay.
Thank you. Femi.
That's funny. Hey everyone, my name is Femi. Pronouns is he and they. You decide. I am African American from New York City, but currently live in California. So I studied abroad back in 2014, so the year Francisco graduated, but studied abroad in Nice, France, and graduated the following year. And then I did some work abroad. I worked in Ethiopia, Ghana, in Ecuador, and then traveled to a few places and just had various types of jobs. So yeah, that's pretty much it, right? That's all the questions.
Thank you. That's actually a lot. Okay. So within the field of study abroad, there are 5 F's or factors, and we call them friends, family, fears, funds, and fit. These are known as the main obstacles for students deciding to go and study overseas. Within these 5 obstacles, which ones did you experience prior to going to study abroad or while you were overseas?
I'll go first with this one. So for me personally, the only one I feel like experienced was funds. I wasn't really like afraid to go abroad. It was just something I always wanted to do. So in terms of the funds, what I did was I just applied to a bunch of scholarships, and luckily I ended up able to get the Ramon Perez scholarship, and it was a full ride scholarship to Shanghai, China. So that was like honestly the best thing ever for me. So that kind of put me over like the edge, like deciding if I wanted to go or not. Since I got that scholarship, it was just like, why not? Like, let's go. So
I would also agree with the funds aspect of it. So when I was in high school, I studied French. And since then I was like, oh, I'm definitely gonna go study abroad in Paris one day. So not doing much research on cost of studying abroad, I just went in with my eyes wide open until I went to the financial aid office discussing with the woman, and she told me if I wanted to study abroad, it would be like an additional like $10,000, I think. And I just end up crying in this woman's office, and she's just sitting there staring at me like, I don't know what to say. But she said the perfect thing and mentioned scholarships. And she was the one that told me about the CAPA scholarship, the Jose Ramon scholarship. And ever since then, I was like, okay, if I'm going to go abroad, I'm going to make sure that I get these programs funded. So my semester in London was fully funded. And when I went to China and participated in that business research program, that was also fully funded. So I would just say like the biggest piece of advice is please make sure to do your research because there is money out there to fund these opportunities. So make sure that you are reaching out to the appropriate people and of course using Google.
Okay, so for me, I would have to say mine's was, I feel like I dabbled in all of them, but I'd say like the one that kind of like really was like the big thing for me was probably the fear part. Cause like I was one of those people where I had signed up to go abroad, but I was supposed to go with my friend. So both of us were kind of like supposed to go together. And then, you know, she was a year higher than me, and you know, things with her academic kind of had to like sit back a little bit. So she was like, you know, I really can't go. And I don't know, I think like a rush of fear just came over me because one, I was going to a country completely outside of my comfort zone. I hadn't even heard about the Czech Republic until like probably 2 weeks probably before the application was due. So I was already going to a place outside of my comfort zone and I was going by myself. So I don't know, I just started kind of like panicking, but I mean, it turned out for the best, but yeah, that was my F.
Thank you.
For me, I wasn't like so much scared. I think everybody gets a bit of nerves, you know, going to a whole new place, especially if it's by yourself. So I wouldn't say I was scared. Family wasn't a thing because I'm very grateful that I feel like all of my life since I was born in the DR and a lot of my childhood consisted of traveling back and forth between the US and the Dominican Republic. I'm used to it. And I did an exchange program in China in high school my senior year. So my mom, like, she had to sign off for that. So she was okay with me continuing to travel. I think for me, the funds was a big one. I did get a couple of scholarships. I know the office has a page on their website where it lists a bunch of scholarships. And I remember I read through them. I applied to a whole bunch, and I thankfully got a few. And so for Brazil, I got the Gilman Scholarship. I'm not sure if anyone has heard, but they have been very, very, just supportive when it comes to international education. And so thankfully, I was very privileged to get that. And the other thing I also want to say regarding funds, I was an education opportunity program student, and which means it's a program that supports you financially and also academically. And so one of the things that they did and helping me supporting me to study abroad was they would cover I forget what it's called, but there's a deposit at the beginning when before you finish the full application. So they had covered all of that for the programs I did. And yeah, I think funds was probably the hugest one. Everything else is kind of like, bro, I'm ready to go.
I'll answer. So just that, I think that in my experience, one of the biggest obstacles for me was just that like I didn't come from a experience of having traveled much, like growing up or with my family, and so knowing that I definitely wanted to study abroad, but not really necessarily knowing how was a weird thing. So I didn't feel like I had very many role models or people that I could go to. Lizette was a really helpful resource back when I was like figuring out these things. So she was like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna do this. You're gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome." And like just her positivity really made me feel a lot more comfortable going through the process. So I think, finding those people that can just champion your interests, even if they're not necessarily the first person you think of, really makes a big difference just to feel motivated and to get over all those other hurdles.
So when I first decided I wanted to study abroad, inspired by one of my longest friends, I had different set of reasons to why I wanted to study abroad. It was kind of coming from like a place of not having my mental health wasn't really there. So my goals was not really aligned with maybe my professional, trajectory. And so I think as I got closer to studying abroad, I never really took the time out to analyze my own, reevaluate my own goals. And so I didn't know at that time, friends and family wasn't really, it wasn't really connected to something that I really thought about, but funds, because I really wanted to go overseas, funds was just kind of one of those things that I've always thought about, but I didn't ask any questions. And I interned as a study abroad department too. And I didn't ask any questions about any of the scholarships that was out there, specifically for students of color. It was kind of one of those things where I just took out loans and went, but funds was definitely a big concern, especially when I got to France. And I had to really budget and try to do this conversion and live within my means. And that was even a challenge too. And so that was the only thing that really was in the forefront of my mind, but I was always that hippie kid in my family that always just go and do things. So everyone was like, okay, yeah, Femi is gonna go and that's just what I do. And I would not talk to you. So friends and family was just kind of like, but yeah, funds definitely.
Thank you. How do you feel your identity affected your overseas experience? And by identity, I mean your gender, your sex, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or just in general, did you feel that your ethnicity affected your experience abroad?
Yes. So London, honestly, not so much. London has a lot of similarities to New York City to me, so I was fine there. But China, absolutely. The China program, it was like a large group of us that we were all different races and ethnicity. So we literally walked around looking like a college pamphlet that just screamed diversity. So we attracted so much attention. I have this running joke that I say when I was in China, that's the moment I felt like I was Beyonce, because everywhere that you go, people are taking pictures. They're either coming up to you and asking to take these photos, or they're just trying to act like they're sneaking and take the photos. There's random pictures of all of us from that group of us literally holding people's kids. We were sitting down at a restaurant and these group of people just came up to us and we were having conversations, and then they just offered to pay for our entire meal just because we had a great conversation with them. And I will say that some people did handle it better than others, and it could be overwhelming at times when you just want to take a walk or sit down and eat and there's so much attention being drawn to you. And I personally didn't take offense to it. I felt like they were more intrigued and in awe with me than I didn't get any negative vibes from it. I'll say that. But with that being said, that doesn't mean that stuff like that can't happen. This is not during my study abroad time at Oswego, but I was an English teaching assistant through the Fulbright program in Croatia for the 2019-2020 cohort. And my time in Croatia is when I had crazy experiences when it came to race, and people would ask me the most inappropriate conversations and questions. I was also there during the height of the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. So things that people would say to me, and it wasn't like they were trying to be offensive, they were just genuinely curious about race relations. Tough conversations could be had, but I will say that if if you go to these places, you need to be like very sure and confident in yourself. And because I had that and I know who I am as a Black American woman. So you asking me those ignorant questions it's annoying, but it doesn't like take me over the ledge and make me feel some type of way, because I'm very sure of who I am. What you see on the news about people that look like me has nothing to do with Tiana Morris. So that's just a big piece of advice I would give. Just stay true to yourself. And if you feel like engaging in those conversations, go ahead. But if it's too much for you and you don't feel like answering those stupid questions, set boundaries for yourself. Sometimes people did come up and try to touch me, touch my hair, touch my skin, set boundaries immediately and say, please don't do that. You know, you never want to put yourself in a situation where you are severely uncomfortable and you just are lost and confused.
I want to piggyback off of what Tiana said. I definitely agree. China is pretty crazy how like they're just, it's in their culture, like in the TV, they never see people of color. They never, like, especially the older generation, they never get a chance to see somebody of color. So when they see us, it's so astounding. They think you're a celebrity and they want to take pictures everywhere. You like literally, you can't go to the store without taking a picture with somebody or somebody staring at you, or even going down a block and coming back. Like it's going to be something. But personally, I kind of took that to my advantage and I just made like a lot of friendships, or just like I talked to a lot of people to find like the really, really cool spots to go, or like the really, really like not tourist attractions, but just the places that like only locals would know to go. So that's pretty much how I took that. Everywhere I went, I would just like, if they wanted to take a picture, I'll take the picture. But then again, I'll have a conversation with them, ask, hey, like, what's the best spot to go eat here? Or like, what's the best place to go see that's not really a tourist attraction? So that's kind of how I use that to my advantage. But I definitely do agree that it's a little overwhelming at first, but I just kind of, brushed it off and was like, hey, like, they're not from where I'm from, so they don't know people of my background. So I understand them, but I do think that there should be a boundary. But however, like that's just not in their culture. Like they literally never see people of color. So I kind of understood that and just kind of use it to my advantage.
Yeah. So two identities that that really, in many ways, defined my experience was my sexual orientation, just being a queer person, and my nationality. And people responded to these identities very differently. So in France, I think like being fetishized was dating abroad is real. Dating while Black abroad is so real because people have their preconceived ideas of who you are, and based on these different channels that they receive information about us. And so they like fetishize you a lot. And that was really hard, like trying to dispel a lot of these like false narratives about who I am and like my queer and sexual identity. And that was really hard. And then like when I lived in Ethiopia and Ghana, that was like I had to go back in the closet. So here you in France, like it's okay to be like openly queer, but in Ethiopia and Ghana, people was more so like you couldn't be that. And so now I'm like have a whole set of experiences where I have to like be the antithesis of my own personality. So I had to be like more masculine than being like very fluid. And that was even a challenge when I was there. But I think nationality was even more interesting in terms of like my nationality as Americans, particularly living in Ecuador. It's interesting because in Ecuador and a lot of places in South America, they have a perspective about Black people, like Afro-Latinos. And I think a lot of times in conversations that I had in Spanish, my nationality in a lot of ways gave me privileges that a lot of my Afro-Latino and Latinx brothers, sisters, queer folks didn't have. And so they would come at you and think that that's your Afro-Latino until they realize that, I'm from the United States. And then suddenly, how they treated me before, which they probably came off with like an attitude or stereotyped me is now completely different. Now they're like, oh, tell me about the United States. You must have a lot of money. And so my nationality in a lot of ways trumped my racial identity in South America. And even in like Ethiopia and Ghana, like my nationality in a lot of ways, like they didn't see my experiences being like unique or individualized in United States, like what the Black experiences in the Americas, they saw it as you're wealthy, you're American, so your experience is X, Y, and Z. And that was different, even with my family who lives on the continent. So yeah, those are the two identities that in a lot of ways affected my experience, or defined it, I should say, not in a negative sense, but it was interesting. And yeah, to being confident, like you have to be confident. And you have to know how to navigate those conversations and educate people, because everyone have a lot of bias, and they use stereotypes to kind of just form their own opinions about who you are.
Wow, Femi. I think there's so much that like as you were talking, it kind of brought me back to my childhood in the Dominican Republic. And but first I want to touch base regarding China, because as I mentioned, I was there in 2014, my senior year of high school, and it was very much like, oh, I'm walking in the street and I feel like a celebrity. Like people after you taking pictures, you're in a restaurant, you would have a whole crowd outside just like, wow. And to me, I also saw that as a way of like, they're very curious and they're very, they've never seen this before. I never took it negatively, but as we've mentioned, it's important if it's difficult for some people, it's important that you set boundaries and allow that for yourself. Now regarding I think identities for me that I've noticed kind of like either been a challenge while abroad is being a woman. Whenever I'm out outside and I can't be out too late, or I have to bring someone, more so probably a male and counterpart, so I will feel safe. And also being Afro-Latina, and I'm gonna say being American. So living in between the Dominican Republic and the US, up until recently, and I want to say like even last year, I never really accepted my identity as American. As every time I would go abroad or even go to the Dominican Republic, and people would call me, oh, you're American, you're American. I'm like, no, I'm Dominican. It felt like people always put the American first and forgot about, where I was born and my roots. And so when I was in the Dominican Republic, I was considered American, more so than Dominican. And then when I'm here, I'm considered more so Dominican than American. So it was always this confusion, right? And so this happened to me also when traveling in Latin America, Brazil, when I went to Nicaragua at some point. And so it was in Brazil specifically, I blended it pretty well. Like people believed I was, I was Brazilian. I think mostly because my Portuguese was fluent, and also being Afro-Latina, there's a lot of Afro-Latinas in Brazil. Up until I would tell them like, yeah, I'm American, then it's like kind of like, oh, this fetishizing of like, ooh, where you're from, like, what is it like over there? Or like a lot of men trying to approach me and talk to me, and what's your number? Do you want to go? And it's kind of it becomes very I guess challenging, because then you start asking yourself, okay, what do I identify as, and who do I tell people I am? But it goes back to being confident and understanding that you don't have to be one thing, you can be multiple things, and that is absolutely okay. And if people don't understand that, that's also fine. You can be open to the conversation. But I think it's a beautiful thing seeing how your many different parts of yourself kind of like how they interact with the rest of the world, and I think that's always very interesting. But yeah.
For me, I kind of guess I would just like piggyback off of like everyone else. I think for me, like the identities that kind of like affected me the most would definitely have to be my race, my gender, and my nationality. For me in particular, like in terms of like race, like in Eastern Central Europe, there's a lot of white people. Like, you don't encounter a lot of Black people. I personally grew up I'm from New York City, I'm from Harlem. I grew up around a lot of Black people, so I've never really had to encounter white people before. So while I was in the Czech Republic, you know, riding to school in like the trams, you know, and like the people on the trams just staring at me. Like for a second, I kind of forgot why they were staring at me. And I was just like, you know, that's kind of rude. Like, y'all shouldn't be looking at me like that. But then I kind of remembered, I was like, oh crap, like I'm the only Black one on the tram. So people would kind of like just be looking at me. And like I said in the beginning, I thought it was rude, but over time I was like, you know what, it's fine. They ain't never seen nobody like me. So it's fine. And, you know, people did come up to me, especially like when I traveled outside of the Czech Republic, so like Slovakia areas and stuff, they asked to like take pictures with me. I wasn't too rude about it. I know I took some pictures with them, but then there were some people I was just like, no, I don't want to take a picture at all, because I started to feel uncomfortable over time. But in terms of like my gender as well too, especially like when I went out to like, you know, night events, like pubs and like, you know, dance clubs and stuff like that, I feel like my gender definitely did play a significant role along with my race, because a lot of people have this idea of how Black women in particular carry themselves. Like they have this video vixen image in their head of how you're supposed to, you know, act and stuff. And when I was like the complete opposite, a lot of people were kind of like, I don't want to say appalled by it, but like they were kind of like shocked by it. Like, yes, like not all of us be out here going crazy, like, okay. But in terms of like my nationality, I would definitely have to say, like, being that I have grown up around a lot of Black people, being that when people ask me about my nationality, I usually don't identify as American. I'll give them my, you know, like my ethnicity, where my family is from. So I'll be like, you know, I'm Malian and I'm Ivoirian. And that's kind of how I've always identified. So when I went to the Czech Republic, it's like I had to kind of abandon those like identities, simply because when I spoke, you can't tell that, you know, my ethnicity is from West Africa. You could just hear the American accent. So off the rip, it's like me telling somebody else, you know, I'm Malian, I'm Ivoirian, it'll probably go over their heads versus me just saying, hey, I'm American. It'll make a lot more sense for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of you all mentioned things that I was thinking of saying, but I think that the reality is like the way that you identify is based a lot on the context that you're in. So when you're in the US, you have your identity and that's who you are, right? You know that. And when you go abroad, it changes in a lot of ways that you do and do not anticipate. I think, you know, in my case, spending a lot of time in Latin America, I mean, I tell you about Mexico, I was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala. You know, I thought, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna fit in because like my family's from Mexico and Puerto Rico. I'm Latino, great. And when I was in Mexico, oftentimes I'd be with other study abroad students, and like, yeah, people thought that I was like the tour guide with the group of like Europeans, which benefited me in certain ways, certainly, you know, but also was kind of like weird. I didn't really anticipate. And when I was in Guatemala, it was a little bit different because I was one person in a community, and because it was a small rural place, like people knew that I was an outsider, and so my way of fitting in didn't really work the same way. And over time, you know, once you kind of get labeled as the American, as the person from the US, like at least in my case, you know, I kind of had to answer for certain things. So when things in the news about like the administration and immigration policies, people would hear about that and they'd ask you like, what's happening? What's going on? What's this? And so that made it really awkward for me to have to then defend certain kinds of things that I wasn't really in a position to have to defend. And so I think being really aware of the fact that who you are is based a lot on like who you're surrounding yourself with, makes a really big difference. And I think also what Femi was mentioning about like being queer in other parts of the world, like when I was in Guatemala, interacting with like LGBTQ people, it made me realize like the privilege that I have in being from the US that I didn't necessarily think about. So like the fact that I would, you know, we went to like Pride events in some cities there, and it was like really interesting and inspiring to see LGBTQ people in a place that's like really, they're persecuted in a lot of ways and deal with like discrimination that I don't necessarily have to do. I get to go back to the US and live my life in a society that writ large accepts me for who I am. And just kind of like handling that tension between identifying and having solidarity with people, but then also recognizing your difference and what that means.
Thank you. That was great, guys. Thank you for sharing. What would you say to a student self-conscious about his or her identity and who is apprehensive about studying overseas? So what would you say? What advice would you give to that student?
I would say first do research on the country that you're going to. So anytime I go abroad, I do, general research about the country, but I like to find blogs from Black people, but in particular Black women, so they can share their experience on what it was like for them to be in that country, just so I can have an idea of what I may or may not be walking into going to that country. As we all mentioned, conversations and questions could possibly happen, and whatever you identify with in the US probably won't be the same in that country. You might have to do a little extra explaining, because I know when I was in London, I couldn't just get the pass of saying I'm from America, like some of my peers. There was always the follow-up question that was like, okay, but where are you really from? And as far as I know, I'm American. My entire family is from here. So I made a decision anytime I go abroad, instead of me saying I am from America, I just say I'm from New York. And New York is like this amazing state and holds so much weight. So then when I say that, their eyes get big and they're like, oh my God, you're from New York? Tell me about New York. And that kind of tailors the conversation from the, okay, but where are you really from? And also in those cases when people are trying to like pry and say, okay, I'm like, okay, do you know who LeBron James is? Do you know who Beyonce is? Everyone says yes. I'm like, boom, those are Black Americans. So if they can be Black American, then so can I. So I would just do your research, know who you are and what you identify with. And again, if you feel like engaging in those conversations you have to pick and choose your battle. So if you think this is going to be an educational moment and it's worth it to sit there and try to get this person to understand what you identify with, fine. If not, then just say, listen, this is what I am. It is what it is.
These are great tips. I mean, there's a lot of vloggers out there, travel vloggers. You go on YouTube, search it up, and you can see what it's like if you're more really interested in seeing like, the physical version of people's experiences. Blogs, like Tiana said, they're great. I think one thing I will say, because excuse me, before I was in Brazil in 2017, before I left for my study abroad semester, I wasn't certain of my identities. Like I said, it only like literally last year, it was when I began really taking like feeling proud and being okay with calling myself American. So I do want to say that you don't have to necessarily know exactly who you are or like what you identify as, because sometimes the country you're going to, the experiences you will have out there will bring that out of you. It'll really make you reflect on your past experiences, on your childhood, and you'll begin to really like just learn a lot about yourself. But I think it's always very interesting before you go to really like study the country, get to know a bit of the culture, the basics of the language. I think it's so important. And all in all, I think, I really encourage people to take the leap. Just take the leap. I think I think study abroad and traveling to other countries has a lot to offer, not only for yourself, but the people in the country, because the exchange of knowledge and culture that occurs is very powerful. So, if you're on the edge, there's going to be a good experience or not, like, do a bit of research, but know that whatever happens, whatever ends up happening, there's going to be a learning, there's going to be a learning opportunity at the end of the tunnel. So that's a plus. But yeah, just, you deserve it. You go out there. If you don't see people who look like you out there and you're like, oh, do I belong? Oh, yes, you do belong. So you do belong and you deserve to go and travel the world. And that's it. Yeah.
I definitely agree with everybody who spoke. I think you guys definitely kind of brought it really nice together. I definitely would recommend, if you are going to a place, definitely do your background research on it. I personally watched a lot of YouTube videos on it because, like I said, I didn't even know where the Czech Republic was before I left. So I had to like find some videos, and I'm not even gonna lie, I think I only found 2 videos with Black women in it. So I kind of was just going off of those. I think I might have watched those videos like 15 times just so I could be in like their shoe, just live vicariously really quickly. But yeah, so I definitely would say like definitely do not, like for me, the fact that, you know, I almost allowed fear to be one of the reasons why I didn't travel abroad. Like now that I look back, I'm like, girl, you really tried to play yourself. You almost played yourself. But I would definitely say do not allow like fear to be the reason why you don't go anyplace. And one thing I actually learned is like, don't rely on other people either. Like to this day, when I travel, like even while I was in the Czech Republic, I was able to like visit like 9 other countries. Like I went there with or without somebody. Like it was one of those things that I'm not waiting on nobody anymore. Like even now I make my plans and I'll just tell people after I made the plans, like, hey, I'm going here. You can book your ticket here and you can meet me there. But if you wait on other people, it would just never ever get done. So like just really just go by yourself. Like find comfort in being uncomfortable. Like traveling makes me so uncomfortable, but I found comfort in it. Like I love the ending result. I love the way I feel when I come back, because like I'm just a whole new person at this point. I'm really just a whole new person. So I definitely would recommend just go. And in terms of like identity, if you know your identity at heart, because I'm not gonna lie, like your identity here and your identity in another country may not always just work, and that's just the way things are. So you may just have to adjust yourself to just fit into your environment, but just don't let it get to you to the point where you feel like you're losing yourself. Like always find some type of touch with yourself. And I always like to recommend people find like something abroad that they can kind of call like home, like their safety net. That way you can come back to and kind of like just realign yourself with who you really are. And, you know, that way you still have touch with yourself. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the study abroad advisor answer because this is what my master's degree is in. So something practical I think of is RIF, Research Identity Funds. In the research part, I encourage you before you study abroad, first of all, lay out your goals. Why do you want to study in that country? If it's the language you're interested in, research, I encourage you to like take classes in that. Don't, like, for an example, if you want to go to Germany just because of like, I don't know, perhaps of their beer gardens, I think that's a terrible reason to want to go to Germany. But really learn the historical and cultural realities of the target country. Understand, you know, how those historical and cultural realities shapes their perception about the world, about people. Along with that research, I encourage you not to research commentary of other people, because other people carry their prejudice about based on the experiences that they had in this country. And a lot of times that can taint your own perspective. It biases you in a way that you have an opinion before you get to that country, and it sets you up for failure. It creates these false expectations. I encourage you to just research perhaps like, other than the observable things, observable cultures such as like music, clothes, hip hop, maybe think about like perhaps the values and attitudes that people hold in that country, and think about how that might be different from you. And that will really help you in terms of navigating that culture, because you will now have a perspective on how to interact from this cross-cultural lens. If you think about kind of that iceberg model, the 90% we don't see. And the identity part is really crucial to what everybody said. We hold our identity is very nuanced, and human is the living testimony of what a contradiction look like and feel like. And oftentimes our identities, how we grew up, the languages we learned, like how we learned the language of apology, these type of things will influence how we interact with other people from different cultures. So really take some time to think about your own identity, think about what the languages you learn, think about how behaviors, things that really informed your own opinion about other people. Think about your values as well, because your values are so important. You may have a value that's in conflict with perhaps another culture, and be open-minded to that. Because for an example, you can want to go to the Middle East, everyone has a perspective of like what modesty might look like or what feminism might look like, but their definition of it is so different. And this based off this historical and cultural realities that they hold. And then the last one is funds. One of the things I wish I did, partly because I didn't have the right questions. I didn't know what type of questions to ask. I didn't ask Liz, I didn't ask Keith, who used to work in the study abroad office when I was interning there, what kind of funds exist. And now as someone who's entering the study abroad field, I know that there's organizations like CIEE, IIE, the State Department. They all offer education, funds for education abroad. They all offer some type of funding for students of color. Being a minority is a benefit. They are just throwing cash at students of color to kind of close that gap. In the education abroad. Is still, the numbers are low, but there's funds that exist. Maybe not right now because the funds got cut under Trump, but those funds are being revived. So really ask those questions. I'm a woman. If you have a religious minority, if you're a religious minority, if you have like a sexual orientation that's different, I guarantee you there's some type of education abroad funds that's out there for you. So just really build the relationship with the study abroad department, ask about what kind of funding is out there, and ask to tap into like networks of alumni who probably studied abroad before or studied abroad in the country that you were in. They would be a really great resource for you and to prepare you for studying abroad.
I would say one thing is just to stay confident. Like, I don't mean confident by like going out and saying, hey, I'm American, or I'm black, but I just mean like you are who you are and you can't really change that, like give or take some things, but just be yourself and be confident within yourself. Like you got to understand, like you were born in this country, that's just where you're from. You were born this color, that's just what you are. You got to make do what you have. So don't let anybody kind of deter your feelings or your thoughts or anything because you're a certain type of person. Like if that's who you want to be it. Like I don't know. I just don't think you should allow somebody else to alter your life based on something you just can't change. So I just say, stay confident.
And I will just add that, on top of staying confident, also recognize that like something's going to go wrong at some point and you're just gonna have to get through it. Like, I think we're all here and we've all survived our experiences, but we probably all can recount a moment that was either really awkward or we did something kind of dumb, or maybe we're like, I think you should have done that differently. And just realize that when you're in a context that's very, very different than one you're used to, like you're bound to make a mistake. And so be very forgiving of yourself in those moments and just allow things to pass.
I want to add one last thing that Femi made me think about as he was talking is, I feel like, so after, graduating and then wanting to continue to, study, to travel, there was one thing that I realized, and I was like, it felt like, something was missing. I'm like, I don't want to just travel just to travel. I think there's an important part and crucial part when it comes to studying abroad that people oftentimes tend to forget or may not like be conscious of. And that it's a study aspect, this, studying the culture and the history of the country, it's not like places aren't just like vacation destinations. It's a privilege to be in someone else's home and in someone else's land. And so the very least we can do is educating ourselves on, where the people come from, their history, the significance of, their culture, their language. And so I'd say very much keep that in mind. And then regarding the bias, like, yeah, if you go out there and do your research and listen to other people's, experiences, definitely be mindful that that's their experience. It doesn't mean that yours is going to end up being the same. But yeah, I just thought I'd point out those two other things again. But yeah, incredible input, everybody. I'm really loving this.
Thank you. And one last question. Can you each indicate a highlight of your experience or experiences overseas? And how has your study abroad experience as well, for those of you who have worked abroad, how those experiences have impacted you? And what did you bring back from those experiences that make you go like, yes,
I can go. So similar to what Naomi was just saying. So when I was in Mexico, I did research for my thesis at Oswego that, you know, came out of like, there was this course on development. I'll just take that because it sounds like interested in, it's similar to what I was studying with political science. And in the process, my professor took me to communities to interview women who participated in this government program. There's a conditional cash transfer thing. I won't get into the details, but anyways, what that process taught me was that, you know, studying and talking to these women, it's really great. And I'm learning a lot about their lives and their experiences, but like, I'm going to go back to my computer and I'm going to write up this paper, and then I'm going to go back to the US and I'm going to write up my thesis, and it's going to sit on a dusty old shelf somewhere in Oswego. And like, what good is that going to do to the world? And so I had this like crisis moment where I realized like all the privilege that I have that I didn't realize, you know, being Latino in the US, like I constantly saw my marginalization. And then being there in this moment, I realized like all this privilege that I have with me, and I need to do something with it. And so that led me to then joining the Peace Corps, getting my master's in development. I now work for a development organization. You know, and it's complicated. Things aren't always going necessarily the way that I want them to, but that moment when I was studying abroad really, like, I mean, normally it changed my life, but like, it's definitely put me on a trajectory that I've been on for the past 6 years. And that's not something I would have anticipated before I went abroad.
For me personally, I think it was just finding out a lot about myself. Like, I never really traveled alone, let alone 15 and a half hour flight away from home. Like, everywhere I've been, all the other countries I've been has been with family. But for the first time ever, I went to China alone. And this is a country where nobody speaks English. Like, nobody is from where I'm from. There's probably, like, I barely even met people from America. So that was just something that I was like, wow, like coming back thinking about it, it's like, whoa, like you really did that. Like, you were there for 4 months and you had to learn how to speak a new language, and you had to communicate with other people and learn a different culture. And that was just like amazing to me. Like, I didn't even think I could, I didn't really think about it, but thinking that I can do it is like, now I feel like I can do anything. Like, that's just so crazy to me. But also, just some fun highlights. Like, I visited the Great Wall, went on like a high-speed rail. Like, those are things that like I read about in textbooks that I felt like were super, super cool to actually do. So those are some fun, cool things that I did.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So I wanted to study abroad. For me, just traveling and working overseas, you know, really in a lot of ways helped me to love myself. I really fell in love with the process of learning about cultures and people, but I really learned to love the contradictions that I hold in my own identity. And I really learned how to lean into discomfort. And, you know, I travel by myself all the time. Sometimes I grab a group of friends, but my international experience really did lead me down a path of just like being now like a consultant. I consult with the federal government, and my master's is will be in international education management. And so I'm doing this work of getting other students of color to go abroad, and I'm collaborating with HBCUs, and I'm trying to get Black students to go abroad. And I have so many like, you know, friends and abolitionists who's in this work who look like, who's melanated and we all talk, and we all are doing this collective work of reimagining a future where education abroad looks like us and creating that space. And, you know, it's really interesting now being a professional in this field and looking at, you know, the structural barriers in government to get access to funds for education abroad, or, you know, what some of the issues for students of color. So being on the other side of that table and doing justice work, and really advocating for folks like y'all is really the path that Study Abroad led me to, because, you know, I had to really reflect on my own experience. And to be honest with you, as a teacher, you'd be amazed watching white students in bilingual schools or immersive programs with relative ease to be able to go overseas and be like, I've been here for a summer, and watching my Black students and students of color, other students of color who just don't have that experience. And so doing that work at the K-12 level and really inspiring, you know, young people and parents to take that opportunity to go abroad is just where it's at for me, and kind of the work that I'm doing as a consultant and in education abroad and with my master's degree. So, you know, I really owe it to that experience. And yeah, just I'm confident. Like, During the rehearsal says I laugh when people deny me a seat at the table. When I tell you, I'm like, this time it's like, yeah, if somebody discriminate against me, whatever, they have their own bias. I'm like, listen, like you talking to somebody, queer, Black, educated, speak 3 languages. Like there's, what you think about me doesn't hold weight. You can't affect me. I am as bad as I am Beyonce. I am Beyonce. So, so that's kind of the confidence that I have. And it really warps your perspective about the world, honestly. You start asking deeper questions and you just you do the work that you love and it's gonna allow you to tell people like, listen, bye Felicia, like you don't got any prevalence in my life or relevance in my life. So definitely study abroad, really lean into that discomfort. We all hold identities that in many ways can really create fear in us. But at the end of the day, I promise you the reward is going to be twofold. I promise you that. And so study abroad and live life.
Yes. Oof. My heart was warm. I was like, yes, keep going. Honestly, I'm gonna repeat one thing that you said, and is we all hold identities. No matter who you are, we all hold identities. And it's very easy growing up to, just not really understand them or, know them. And I think traveling very much has you reflecting on that. And I think one thing that really stands out to me when I think about all of my travel experiences is this one trip to Benin, which is located in West Africa. And I didn't realize this up until I didn't, you have experiences, they happen and you're like, oh, they're great. And then years later, you're like, wait, this all makes sense. I feel this way now. Wait, I felt like that because of this. I get it. And when I was in Benin, it very much felt like home to me. And it was very strange for me to, I was like, why is it that just the music, the people, the culture really feels like I get this feeling of oh, I really belong here. And, I grew up in a family where we didn't really talk about our, ancestry and our African side. There was a lot of in the Dominican Republic, and maybe some of there's a lot of I guess rejection to where we come from, and there's very little owning up to that. And so I wasn't very much used to it. And one of the things that the trip in Benin made me realize is I love this music. I feel this music in my soul, in my soul. I feel the drums, and I'm ready to stand up and dance. And that's because this is where my people come from. And it's one of those things that if I really if I keep thinking about it, I'll begin to cry. I'm like, wow, it's just so beautiful. It's really so beautiful. And going back to the whole thing of who you are, whatever it is that you look like, it's beautiful, point blank, period. You know what I mean? And as DeAndre was saying, do not allow that to dictate whether or not you're worthy of those experiences. Once again, you belong and you deserve that. And not only, you're doing yourself an incredible I feel like this service by allowing your fears to take more of a priority. But also I think the world, people abroad learn so much from you. Who knows, maybe now people who came across us while we were abroad, and they still remember remember that one stranger that I happened to take a picture with, or you just never know what kind of impression you leave on people and what they learn from you. So I think it's just beautiful. And yeah, that's all. I could keep going, but I'm gonna stop.
Thank you.
Anytime Lizette reaches out to me to do any type of assistance with the abroad office, I will always say yes, because going abroad and being at Oswego truly did change my life. And those experiences are unmatched. You learn so much about yourself. Like everyone has been saying, you're put in certain situations that you don't know how you will handle it until you're in that situation. And your mind just expands so much because you learn about a culture. When you go visit places, you can do your research. And you know, unfortunately, we have an idea of what we think this country is going to be like and how the people are, but you don't truly know until you get there and experience it for yourself. Having these experiences, and I'm like, okay, I want to be in this field because it really changed my career trajectory. So my goal was, okay, I need to get more people from underrepresented groups to have these experiences and go abroad and not break the bank to do so. Because again, I will highlight the money is there. Anytime I went abroad, I made sure that it was a fully funded program. So after graduating, I went on to pursue a master's in international education because, you know, I not only like the study abroad aspect, but I really did like working with international student populations as well, because I've been in their shoes when you're placed in this foreign country and you just have to figure things out. So any way that I could be assistant of these students that come to the US and they're just as confused on how to open a bank account, how to ride public transportation, can you be my friend and you know, help me just speak English on a regular, just so I can become a little bit more fluent and learn informal English. These are things that in this career path, I probably wouldn't have had a chance to experience if it wasn't for my time at Oswego and going into that abroad office often, you know, speaking to Lizette and Keith and Caitlin, and they were extremely helpful. If I could highlight one experience of my time abroad, which is very hard to do because all those moments were truly, truly special, but just the conversations and exchanges I had in China. Because those conversations, not only did I get to learn from them, because we read all the time about what happens in China, but when you're there and you're speaking to people, and then also like what happens in the US, those conversations are invaluable and I hold them dearly to this day. And just waking up and looking out my window, and I would literally be like, I'm really sitting here in Shanghai. Like, what? I could never imagine when I was a child to really think one day that I would be in China having conversations with people, participating in a research conference. Like, what? And I have these experiences thanks to Oswego.
For me personally, I guess I would say like combining like all my experience abroad, and like one thing that I've like gotten out of them is like one thing for sure I got out of it was that I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like that's the one thing I really got out of it. Like when I had got back from my studying trips and stuff like that, like reverse culture shock is a real thing. And like when I say I fell into like, I'm not even gonna drag it and say depression, but like I fell into like a real big slum. Like I was like not happy being back in Oswego. I was not happy being back in America in general, if I'm being honest. And I was like super, super sad. And I don't know, like it just like that moment is like I really realized like, you know, I am a criminal justice and sociology major. So off the rip, I kind of had like that whole idea that, you know, I was going to become a homicide detective and whatever the case may be. But then when I got back, like this was like the first time, like this experience literally made me question everything that I knew. I was like, do I even want to do this anymore? Like, is criminal justice my path to, you know, go on? Like, because the way I felt when I was abroad, like when you go abroad, especially when you travel to like other places, or even if you stay in one place, like the freedom that you get is like, is no freedom. Like you can't find it anywhere else. And that was like just one thing I was like, yo, I literally cannot live without this. Like I have to do this every day. Like even talking with you guys, I'm over here like, you know, I am a senior. I graduate next semester. So I still have a few more months left. I'm over here like, maybe let me see if I can squeeze something in a 2-week program. Now I'm over here, my wheels is like turning right now. But literally, I would have to say like my experiences really just made me realize like traveling is definitely something I want to do for a very, very long time. And in terms of like moments, I guess I would say like every time I was traveling to a new destination, I guess I just had those moments where, you know, I was just like kind of also like, you know, oh wow, like I'm really about to travel to Italy, or I'm really flying to France right now. And just always just coming back to like just always just giving out gratitude, because again, like this is a privilege. Like people dream about traveling like this and aren't able to do so because of, you know, different issues. And me just being able to do so simply because, you know, I took advantage of a study abroad program at my school is just something I'm just like, wow, like I'm just so grateful for this experience. So yeah.
Okay, so we're almost coming to the end of our time here. I just want to say thank you to each of you for your willingness to share about your study abroad experience and your work experiences, for being true to yourself, for being true to the cause. I mean, the cause, CAUSE, of studying abroad, because it is a cause. It's an education opportunity that you each had, that you took forth, and then now, because of those experiences, you are able to help us in this field to really encourage other students to study abroad. And that is key. I myself studied abroad twice as an undergraduate, and it was the best experience that I made as well. And for many people that work in this field, we all feel the same way, that we want to do everything in our power to propel every single student to have the opportunity to study abroad. So again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and SUNY thanks you for your willingness to share, and we look forward to hearing more from each of you in the future.
Thank you. This was great.
Yes, such a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
incredible panel. Y'all are so awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
This
Not
is
you.
awesome.
Awesome. So this is a really good conversation.
Yeah.